Good afternoon, everyone, and I'd like to thank you all for being here. On September 23rd of 2016, I sat at this very same desk with Justice Barry, and we announced the terms of reference for the inquiry into the death of Mr. Donald Dunphy. And we're here today on June 27th with the report that's been completed by Justice Barry and the Commission. I'd like to thank Justice Barry, Commission Counsel, we have Ms. O'Brien here, and everyone involved. There was a tremendous amount of work that went into this, and I appreciate the Commissioner's determination to produce this report on time, early, in fact. The purpose of the inquiry was to examine the facts and circumstances of the death of Mr. Dunphy and to make recommendations to avoid future tragedies such as this one. I hope this report will provide greater clarity for the family of Mr. Dunphy and as well as for the citizens of our province regarding the events of that day. This was a very tragic incident, and again I extend my condolences to the family of Mr. Dunphy. I met with Megan Dunphy earlier today and her counsel, Ms. Erin Breen, to personally deliver this report. I felt that was the right thing to do. It was a priority to us to make this report available to the public as quickly as possible. People have been waiting for answers about what happened that day, and although we just received this report ourselves, we were committed to making it available immediately. We are confident that this public inquiry will ensure that matters of public concern have been addressed in a transparent and open manner. And again, I'd like to thank Justice Barry for taking on this very significant task, as well as the Commission Council, all the staff, and everybody within the Department of Justice and Public Safety. This was a tremendous, again, amount of work that was done. And again, I'm very happy that we can stand here today before the inquiry due date of July 1st and announce this report. Obviously, given that I just received this just 3 hours ago, I have not had an opportunity, nor has the department, to go through this report in any kind of exhaustive manner. But again, in making the decision, we felt it was best today to put out the report as soon as we had it so that the public could see it right away, at the same time as us. And in fact, we will be taking some time over the coming days and weeks to review the report and to look at the facts of the matter, the findings, the recommendations, and to make our decisions as we go forward. At this time, I'll open the floor to any questions that you may have, and thank you.
Minister, what was Megan Dunphy's reaction?
Again, I'm sure Ms. Dunphy will have an opportunity to speak as well. I think she was appreciative of the fact that we reached out to her through her counsel to make sure she had the report as soon as we could provide it to her. Again, I can't put myself in her shoes. No doubt it's been an absolutely exhausting couple of years for her to go through this, and she's been quite strong. And this was actually my first time meeting her today. But I think she's appreciative of getting it quickly. I'm sure she'll be taking some time to go through it herself and with her counsel. And it wasn't a long meeting by any means, but just wanted to offer again my condolences to her personally and to make sure she had this report.
This is a quick follow-up. To what extent do you think this will restore public confidence that may have been shaken as a result by all of this?
Well, I think that I've had a number of comments and opportunities over the past 18 months or so to speak about policing in this province. And I think certainly some of the issues that we faced are outside of this particular incident. But the fact that we've taken these steps, that we announced the inquiry, that Justice Barry and his team concluded it on time, will show that we're taking this very seriously and that the public needs to have confidence. And I think that Justice Barry's report will go certainly towards helping that. But there are more steps that we had to take. And obviously some of the recommendations of this report confirm that as well.
Commissioner Barry, what was the biggest impediment for you, did you find, in doing your job, trying to come up with your final report?
You mean in addition to going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark? I believe it was the tremendous number of documents that we had to deal with. There was something like over 100,000 pages They weren't all single exhibits, but many, many pages. And fortunately, I had a hardworking staff. My co-counsel, Sandra Chater, now Madam Justice Chater, and Kate O'Brien, spent an awful lot of time working weekends, evenings, to make sure that we kept up with the schedule. But it was getting a grip on those tens of thousands of documents and finding then the appropriate witnesses to testify concerning them and to interview those witnesses. That's what took a tremendous amount of time.
The RCMP investigation?
We had the complete file of the RCMP, and we had additional information that we obtained through interviewing them during the course of the inquiry.
Commissioner Berry, it's a big document, more than 500 pages. What do you hope the public will take away from this report?
It's not easy to give simplistic answers. There are no simplistic answers. So you'll see I've made certain key recommendations, which I believe would go a long way to avoiding this happening in the future. One has to do with better training, more modern training for police officers in the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, and in fact any police officers who work in the province should be trained in the modern approach where the emphasis is on de-escalation or defusing of a situation rather than resorting to force. Force is not an option that's accepted. It happens only when all else fails, and we wanted to make sure in this inquiry that we put our finger on the things that could be done to improve the ability of police officers to de-escalate rather than having to resort to force, particularly lethal force.
You listed some defects that you believe were in the RCMP's investigation. Do you think that your findings may have been different if the RCMP had done a different investigation?
We looked at everything fairly thoroughly, I think. That was part of the process of restoring trust and confidence. And you notice the title of the report is Promoting Public Trust, Police Investigating Police-Involved Shootings. So my emphasis has been on ensuring that an investigation in future, when it's carried out, is carried out in a fashion that the public has confidence with. And I think that seeing the depth to which we went in exploring the issues, I believe the public will have confidence that the results are as set out here. There may have been some evidence missed by, for example, the fact that there was a less than robust investigation at the time by, it was my belief anyhow, by the RCMP. They could have pushed more strongly at the beginning to test Constable Smythe's testimony, but ultimately I'm satisfied that any of the deficiencies in their approach did not make their decision wrong. They reached the correct decision that there were no charges to be laid in the matter.
Constable Smythe was criticized publicly. Did you find there any errors in his actions?
Did I find there were any errors?
In Constable Smythe's actions?
Well, I believe he admitted himself that in going into the home and letting his attention be removed from Mr. Dunphy, and particularly Mr. Dunphy's hands, that was an error. In training, the RNC receive a big message. It's capitalized in their training materials: hands, 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 because that's going to signify a threat is developing. You'll see the hands move first. And Constable Smythe, although he said it was for the proper reasons, he was attempting his own method of de-escalation or diffusing the situation by looking down, looking away from Mr. Dunphy. That was contrary to the training he had received, so that was an error. Constable Smythe also made certain errors of judgment in the course of the investigation. He had communicated inappropriately with certain media individuals. He consulted with a colleague in preparing his notes for his first RCMP interview. So there were matters such as that for which he could be criticized, but in fairness to him, on the other side, he gave his testimony very spontaneously. He gave his statements to the police very spontaneously. He showed cooperation. He didn't object on the grounds of what people might refer to as legal technicalities, although they're very important. He didn't say, I'm not speaking to anybody till I speak to my lawyer to find out what my rights are. He didn't insist upon, and he did have rights that he could have enforced. So he cooperated with the investigation. He gave 6 or 8, I forget the number of now, different statements at different periods of time, including reenactments on 2 occasions. And he showed spontaneity that would have made it difficult, I think, had he something to hide. So that was a plus factor, I believe, in his favor.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Have either of you spoken with Constable Smythe since the report was finalized?
No.
I haven't. No.
Minister, can you speak to the PSU in terms of its future and how you see it operating?
Well, certainly that's a decision that involves more people than me. Obviously, the Justice Barry has identified, we'll say, deficiencies there and issues with that. But before I can make any comment, obviously that's a matter we have to discuss with the RNC. That's a matter we have to discuss with the Premier and the Premier's office. And like most of the things here, it's going to require a greater conversation than just my making a decision on it.
Minister, do you see anything in this report that you can move on right away?
Again, it's hard to make commentary or suggestions on where we're going to go with this. And that was one of the, I guess, trade-offs when we decided to do this way. In many cases, government receives reports and takes the time necessary to go through so you can come out and announce what your plans are. In this case, I felt the best way for us to get this out to the public, given the public interest in this matter, given the questions that have been asked. I wanted it out as soon as possible, but we will obviously require time to go through the report, which is quite substantial. But the fact that there are 34 recommendations means that things can be done differently, things can be done better, and the purpose of this was not only to determine the facts of the matter, but we're to figure out ways that we can avoid these situations. So obviously I foresee changes coming, but they require conversations with multiple people. Again, it's hard to speculate about that. That's more of an RNC matter. I'm sure he's been waiting to see this report like everybody that's been involved in this. So I'm assuming that he is like everybody today. We're going through the report and reading it and then determining what the next steps are.
Commissioner Barry, can you comment on Justice David Rich's role in this? What were your findings regarding?
Well, unfortunately, I had to conclude that Justice Rich went beyond his mandate and considered himself as an independent investigator rather than an independent observer. The function is to observe in that situation and not to investigate. Also, unfortunately, I had to conclude that Justice Rich had speculated, had arrived at conclusions, given an explanation as to what had occurred, when there was no information to support the position he was taking. So in this type of situation, it's unfair to the parties to speculate in that fashion.
Commissioner Barry, just considering some of the feedback maybe you've had since January about all this, what are your thoughts on the extent to which public confidence was shaken by all of this?
I believe, particularly at the beginning, there was a large reaction, maybe overreaction, with some really far-out hypotheses as to what might be happening. For example, the notion that there was a message being sent, a political message that the government shouldn't be criticized. Well, I think I made a very clear statement in my report that there was absolutely no evidence of any political motivation. And I believe the public were very wrapped up, as far as I could see, in following the inquiry as it went along. We had some amazing emails from individuals who went into depth setting out their understanding of what the findings should be regarding evidence A or evidence B or evidence C, and some of it was very good. Now, of course, I couldn't base decisions on anything other than the evidence that was presented at the inquiry. But I mentioned that just to say that the public, I think, were able to feel they were part of the process. The second last day, we had a seminar on phase 2, and we had good participation by the public through social media, and in some cases directly by participating personally in the inquiry. And all of that, I think, in my opinion, added to the confidence that the public had that we were turning over every stone and looking at every piece of evidence and listening to every witness before arriving at what my conclusions are. I'm not infallible, but I'll be looking closely at what the reaction of the public is in terms of whether we missed anything. I don't think we did, and hopefully we didn't.
All good. I guess just in closing again, I'd like to again thank Justice Berry and his team for this report. Again, we sat here on September 23rd, and there was a lot of questions as to whether this could get done, whether it would get done on time. So I'm obviously pleased with the fact that we sit here today with a finalized report. And I would note that this was a commission, and Justice Berry can speak about it obviously better than me, but this could have went off the rails at any point. This is a difficult matter, and the fact that Justice Berry was able to get this done, get it done on time, and I'd like to think that this truly was a public inquiry. And speaking about the social media side, knowing that you could check and see that the fact that this was being watched around the world, that was able to be tracked on the number of people that were taking in the live feed, for instance. This was truly worldwide in many ways. So again, I'm sure I'll be in front of everybody again in the very near future to talk about the report in more detail, to talk about the recommendations and steps that government should take. I think in closing, the title of the report is showing exactly what our government is trying to do. We need to restore public trust in our policing and our justice system, and I think the steps that we're taking show that we are dedicated to that. And I'd like to thank Justice Berry for his work in ensuring that we can do that as well. Thank you so much.
Do we know how much the inquiry cost?
Just under $2.9 million, 2.85. I may be a bit off there.
It's set out in the report in one of the appendices towards the end. I forget which one.
Yeah,
Sorry, about 2.9?
almost 2.9, yes. Yeah.
And by the way, I didn't receive any of that except around $200 for printer's ink.
Minister, are you any closer to releasing the details of the next inquiry? I think it's search and rescue.
Again, it's something that's being discussed quite vigorously within the department, but not ready to make any public statement on that yet. But again, it's something that obviously I'm thinking about this inquiry coming to a conclusion, knowing that there will be questions on the next one, so I'm hoping to have more information on that very soon. All right, thank you so much.